This is Robert Kraft, and I am your host for the Planet MicroCap Showcase Virtual Investor Conference 2020. And I'm really excited to bring to you a panel that I believe this, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe this is our third or fourth year in a row doing a panel very similar to this. Our first one virtually, but I'm very excited to have this panel again. It's being hosted by Paul Andreola. He is the founder and editor of Small Cap Discoveries, a very well-known MicroCap focused newsletter out of Canada. And I'm so pleased to welcome him, as well as all of our panelists for this panel, which is titled Best Canadian Non-Resource MicroCap Ideas During Coronavirus Crisis. So with that, Paul, I throw it to you, and thank you again so much for hosting this panel.
Thank you so much, Bobby. And hello and welcome. As Bobby said, my name is Paul Andreola. I am the editor of Small Cap Discoveries, and we produce a newsletter basically geared towards finding what we think are the best sort of microcap investing ideas in Canada. And today, I want to introduce you to three companies that we think fit that bill, and certainly companies that we are following. You know, this coronavirus pandemic has created an unprecedented world health and economic crisis. The way we live and work has changed, and the way businesses operate has changed as well. Some of these changes are likely to be permanent, and while almost all businesses are facing new and obvious challenges, there are some unique challenges that affect specific industries. A number of these challenges will be difficult for some, but also create significant opportunities for others. So today I'm hoping that we can discuss some of the issues facing some companies, as well as the opportunities that some of these companies are finding and addressing. You know, I hope you find this panel discussion useful. So today, the three companies that we've brought here, we have Neil Seeman, CEO of RIWI Corp, Sean Krakiwsky, CEO of Nanalysis, and Nick Blitterswyk, CEO of UGE International. Gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining us today. I'd like to start this off by asking you guys all to introduce yourselves and to give a description of your business. And for full disclosure, we are shareholders of RIWI Corp, but we don't own shares in either of the two companies that we're presenting today. So on that, I'll turn it over to Neil and a brief description of your company.
Thank you very much, Paul. I'm CEO of RIWI Corp. We're a global trend tracking and predictive analytics company. So we collect sentiment data and ad test reaction data in all countries of the world, increasingly now with a focus on public health security. Thank you.
Fantastic. Nick, UGE.
Yeah, thanks very much, Paul. Thanks, Robert. So we are a commercial solar company operating in Canada, the US, and overseas in the Philippines. And we develop, build, finance commercial scale projects for the companies that we work with.
And Sean, tell us a little bit about Nanalysis.
I'm the founder and CEO of Nanalysis, and we're the global leader in MRI machines for industrial applications. Hopefully everybody knows what an MRI machine is, and you're probably thinking, what does he mean for industrial applications? If that's the case, I've done my job.
Fantastic. Okay, great, guys. Okay, COVID-19 pandemic. You know, obviously a black swan if we ever seen one. I want to start off with a big question, and I'd like to ask each of you the same question. You know, with what's going on right now, what is the biggest challenge your company is currently facing? And then part of that, how is your company poised to weather the current situation? Let's start with Neil.
Thanks, Paul. For us in the data, sort of global data collection sphere, the biggest challenge is intelligent growth. So we pride ourselves on growing slowly but intelligently. And prior to the outbreak, we had been in a hiring mode. And then you're hit by COVID, and you need to step back and reevaluate. And then, you know, how do we address that? Well, we address it by, again, using the normal sort of approaches to hiring, but at the same time, understanding that job seekers and job holders are all in a period of intense anxiety. And so one needs to accommodate that in the interview process.
Fantastic. The slowdown that all businesses are seeing, how are you seeing that affect your business? Are you is there sort of a change in the way you're using your sales process? Are you seeing it more difficult to find clients? Any changes in just the sales process right now and the resulting sales pipeline?
Thank you, Paul. For us, the sales process does change. You do need to lead with empathy. You know, those people who are getting 400 emails a day are getting 4,000 emails a day. So one needs to be sensitive to just the nature of anxiety that all potential clients are having. At the same time, business continues, right? The lifeblood of business being networking continues, and we all want to do that. So we just network differently. That may be a virtual coffee, a virtual, in my case, non-alcoholic beer. And so it does continue, but one needs to accommodate and listen with empathy.
Fantastic. Sean, same question. You know, what's the biggest challenge your company's facing, and how you guys expect to weather the current situation?
Well, fortunately, we don't need capital, so I guess that's the one positive thing is we have a really strong balance sheet now. You know, our business is seeing sort of an incremental slowdown. You know, in countries like India, where we do a lot of business with, our distributor there has told us to stop shipping instruments into that country because there's just too much uncertainty on how to get a piece of capital equipment from the airport and then installed at a customer location. I guess also we're not going to conferences, which is a big marketing tool for us. It's the physical conferences. So and in our industry, they haven't really translated to the virtual type conferences yet, like this investor conference has transitioned. So it's definitely having an incremental impact on us. And the way we're thinking about it is, you know, the way we communicate with our employees, for example, is that if this lasts another couple of months, really it's not going to have any sort of long-lasting impact on our business. If you know, it were to last quite a bit longer than that, then we'd start to have some decisions to make. But so far, this is not changing any of the strategic decisions that we're making.
Fantastic. And then Nick, same thing, biggest challenge, and how's your company poised to weather this?
Yeah, so in terms of challenge, I think like you know, everyone's touched on already, just like the general slowdown in the economy. You know, we're at about 4 to 6 weeks now into this, and probably the part of our business that you can best see is when we're building the projects, and certainly there's been restrictions on movement and getting building inspectors out and all that type of stuff. So, you know, in the short term, it slowed down what we can do there. But then on the flip side, the actually thing that takes the longest for us in terms of the work that we do is the pre-construction, developing these projects. And this has actually given us an opportunity to really go heads down on that and line up a lot more projects for later in the year, when we all hope that we'll be back to business and constructing more projects. So yeah, so in the short term, you know, certainly making sure that we conserve cash and do what we can to you know, successfully weather the storm, like you said, and then kind of load the spring for a good finish to the year.
Mm-hmm. And now, Nick, I'll stick with you. You know, we've got a saying that never chaos, always opportunity. Are you seeing any new opportunities because of what's going on right now, or new ways of doing business?
Yeah, I think several things come to mind, but first and foremost is, you know, obviously none of us know for sure what the economy is going to look like coming out of this, but we all know that the economy is taking a pretty big hit right now. In our business, we go to our clients, the real estate owners and so on, and most typically offer to rent their rooftops, pay them money for us to be up there, and then we monetize the energy that's being, you know, generated and sold into the grid and sold to off-takers of that energy. So even in the last 4 to 6 weeks, we've seen a really big uptick actually in the amount of interest that we're getting for what we do. I think that in the last month, we've announced 4 or 5 contracts already that have been signed during that period of time. So we're actually pretty hopeful that we can help these businesses and help our business in the meantime by adding a lot more to our pipeline and backlog throughout the process.
Sean, and you, same question. Where are you finding opportunities in the current environment?
Yeah, I mean, we find ourselves in a really terrible situation, but I guess we're just trying to communicate to investors and all stakeholders the space that we're in, which at the highest level is the test and measurement space. So everything that you see around you, everything that you touch, has to be tested and measured in some ways. And of course, we're all being front and center with this testing of this terrible virus. And although we don't have a product to help out immediately today, we do have diagnostic products in our pipeline for the future. For example, to be able to diagnose viral pneumonia versus bacterial pneumonia. And so we're just trying to communicate to people that we think we're in a space that has a very important future to play in our society. So I guess that's what we're trying to do is explain to people that the test and measurement space is a very important space.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I'd say that the whole testing theme or testing narrative right now is obviously it's become pretty mainstream. So I can imagine that any new products that are around any form of testing, whether it's for chemicals or products or disease, I can understand that you probably see some new opportunities there. Neil, same question. Now I appreciate you guys have kind of been in this business to some degree before, as far as disease or disease management or gathering data on this. Are you seeing any specifically new opportunities because of what's going on right now, or is it just more of what you guys were doing in the past?
We've seen a tremendous surge in opportunity, and it's really, I think, a testament to human ingenuity and resilience. Two things maybe to emphasize. The first is data partnerships. So as you say, Paul, yeah, we've been in the business of infodemiology, which is measuring around the world how people produce, consume, and react to information during pandemics. And we got started in H1N1. But the first is just data partnerships. So we've been working now with one Toronto-based company, Think Data, which is in the business of data access. So we work together, and we just announced a significant contract north of $1 million to do that for a large end client collecting data on sentiment and testing and symptomatology testing in 16 countries. And then secondly, a huge opportunity is just the ingenuity and agility in private-public partnerships. So we're getting a large influx of opportunities with the university sector that we work with already and the public sector that we work with already, where there's, let's just say, a bit of a breaking down of the traditional slowness with respect to hopping on an opportunity. So again, the sense of urgency has changed to meet demand.
Okay, fantastic. I think the brief description you guys all gave helps a little bit, but I'm going to give you guys all a little bit more time to really describe what you guys do and why you guys do it better than others. Now, I know all your businesses fairly well, but there's some real neat nuances to what you guys do. And I'd just like to give you a little bit extra time to describe what you do, how you do it, really what the value proposition is to your customer. So why don't we, well, I'll start with you again, Neil. What can you tell us a little bit more about RIWI?
Well, thanks, Paul. So we're in the business of collecting online opinion data on a continuous basis from any information environment, every country in the world. So 229 countries and territories. And there's many value propositions for us. One is the fact that we hear from people who do not traditionally answer traditional surveys or post online, and that's vital in a pandemic when people are reacting to change. We need to get real-time information on who's been tested, who's symptomatic, who's asymptomatic, how they're reacting to government policy. And another value proposition, of course, is that we do not collect any personally identifiable data. This is vital. When you're collecting data from around the world and you need to measure and compare it, you need to understand why in South Korea or Taiwan or China, X policy led to Y reaction. Thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah. And same thing, Nick. Give us a little bit more detail on what you guys do.
Yeah, so I think the key word is developer. So we're a commercial solar developer. The best way to think about it, if you're not that well versed on the solar space, is kind of like real estate. I mean, the first thing that we're doing on the origination side is finding good areas that we want to install solar, just like you were, finding a good place to build a hotel or a condo or whatever. So we find a good space that we want to install solar. We lock down the rights, typically through leasing a rooftop or leasing land, or in some cases could be buying land as well, to install that solar system. So we go through project development, which is I'd say the kind of the sweet, the secret sauce that we have, the most important thing to be able to develop good projects. One of the things that really differentiates us versus other companies, though, is that we have, over the last 4 years, built out the full platform. So we're not just a developer, but we develop it, we build it, and then we finance it. And just starting in the last 6 months, now operating and owning those assets long-term as well. And that's something that at the commercial scale, no one's really been able to master that turnkey platform yet. And that's something that we really see ourselves differentiating against, and really having a good, getting a good benefit to the company over time from that. Because there's a lot of friction when you just play one of those 3 roles, like handing off to another company, et cetera. And when we were a bit smaller and only playing 1 or 2 of those roles, we saw that all the time. So we're really excited for 2020 and being able to show what we can do by doing all three parts of the process there.
Fantastic. And now, Sean, to you. Now, I have a pretty good sense of what you guys do as a business. The way I've always described it is you take a big machine that's mission critical and you shrink it down to where you can now basically use it almost in any application. Obviously, you can do a better job describing it. Why don't we do that?
Thanks very much, Paul. So as I said at the outset, most people are probably familiar with the big MRI machines that are in hospitals that take an image of a human being, or more particularly their body part. What most people don't know is that technology has established itself as the gold standard also for imaging molecules in drug discovery and other applications like that. Those machines are very large, expensive, multiple millions of dollars, require liquid helium and liquid nitrogen to keep the superconducting magnets cool. And basically what we've done is miniaturize that down to a cute little toaster-sized device that, although you can't put a human being in it, you can definitely put a glass tube in it with a new drug that a company has spent, $100 million trying to design and refine and so on. So we've taken that gold standard, we've turned it from a very large thing that's heavier than your car and multiple millions of dollars, and we shrunk it down to a $50,000 benchtop item that can be used by industrial users and research users and so on. So that's the essence of what we've done. We're selling globally using our own direct sales force in combination with distributors in markets like Japan. It's a capital equipment sale with software as a service, a recurring revenue opportunity on top of it. Yeah, we sell to the biggest companies in the world, as well as tiny little 2-person biotech startups. We sell to the biggest universities in the world, as well as tiny community colleges. We also sell to government labs all around the world. The United States is our best market by a significant margin, but we sell into about 50 other countries around the world as well.
And also quite a number of different industries. You mentioned the pharmaceutical and biotech industry, but I recall, the food industry, even law enforcement. I mean, it really covers a lot of applications, does it not?
It certainly does, and it's because the core technology is a platform technology, and then there's application opportunities for each vertical. But you're totally right. Our instrument is used by police forces to look for suspicious drugs in powders. So if there's a suspicious white powder, a police officer can determine if there's heroin or methamphetamines in that powder. Now this isn't the 80s where you can just sort of dip your finger in some white powder and put it on your tongue, and if it tastes a certain way, there's cocaine. You can't do that anymore, right? And so, there's another example. We also sell to mining companies who are trying to determine lithium content in their brine pools. And you're also right with regards to food applications, nutraceutical applications, determining if extra virgin olive oil has been diluted or contaminated with things like cheap soy oil, or sometimes people put harmful things like aniline in what's supposed to be healthy extra virgin olive oil. So many different applications. Some of them we target ourselves, and then others we target with partners.
Fantastic. Okay, great. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'm going to ask a couple questions that are really a little more specific to each of your companies. I'll start with you again, Sean. So you guys a little while ago announced a mergers and acquisitions strategy to accelerate growth over the next few years. How does the current business environment impact that strategy?
Yeah, so we the main reason why we went public about 9 months ago was to execute an M&A strategy. We had 5 companies that we wanted to buy, totally complementary companies, so it's not a roll-up. And we wanted a pubco currency to be able to pay 50% shares for these companies. So the current environment with the capital markets uncertainty has slowed down our M&A strategy. But we're happy to announce that before this crisis commenced, we acquired a company in Strasbourg that had world-class electronics in our space, and pretty strong top line, which is going to be accretive on a revenue multiple basis. And we've already been able to integrate that company. It was 20 people right on the border of France and Germany in a place called Strasbourg, which is a pretty well-known high-tech center. So really, it's a company that we've been working with for several years, and we're sort of taking our world-class magnet technology and combining it with their world-class electronics and software technology. So really excited about that acquisition. We're ready to pull the trigger on several more. We're just sort of dealing with the uncertainty of the markets right now, but as soon as this clears up, we'll be making announcements for further acquisitions. And the objective is to build a fully vertically integrated global instrumentation company with critical mass, especially from the perspective of the financial community, and as fast as possible rather than just doing it organically.
Sean, a little follow-up question. How big is your addressable market? These benchtop MRIs, how big is that potential market?
Well, right now it's a relatively small market, but we think it's growing. So we think it has the potential to grow into a multi-billion-dollar per year market for this actual class of instrument. And there's only one other competitor that has succeeded at being able to miniaturize this technology. And it's a very small company. We think it's sort of a greenfield situation. Right now, about $40–50 million per year is being spent on this particular type of technology. But because of the miniaturization and the new applications that facilitates, we think it has a huge potential in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Okay, great, fantastic. Okay, Neil, I'll turn to you. Okay, so probably more than ever in history, there's a critical need for global real-time data. Pandemic relief mitigation strategies will only be effective if we know what and where we are fighting this disease. Now, I understand RIWI was partly created to work with large organizations to gather this type of data, and the considerable experience that you guys have gained over the last little while. How specifically is that experience helping you in these times?
Thank you. So it's helping in a number of ways. One, I think, is humility, actually, which my parents are scientists, and that's the seed of invention and innovation. So we need to be cautious about all data collected and the communication of data. So understanding the dynamic ways in which data can be misinterpreted or interpreted. But how's it helping us from a business perspective? It's certainly helping us with respect to marquee clients that recognize our pedigree, and the number of inbound opportunities we have are quite considerable. It's helping us in the sense of analyzing much more quickly the return on investment of any potential partnership that could come our way, whether that's in the interests of generating profits or in the interests of marketing. So both of those ways has been very tangible. And then finally, it's also helped us, I think, assess when and why we need to be in a position to provide data openly to the community, which is a part of what we're doing in the sense of enabling countries like Canada and the United States to learn from other countries in terms of what's worked and what hasn't worked in terms of reducing the challenges associated with the pandemic.
Fantastic. Now, you're able to collect data in some pretty difficult to get places. You're collecting data in parts of China, and I recall in the past you've collected data in sort of some of the tougher places to get in Africa. Can you describe some of the programs that you guys are working on right now, collecting some of that hard to reach data?
Sure. So we'll start with China, which is vital and will be for the foreseeable future. So with respect to China, yeah, we're collecting data in over 950 cities, rural and urban, all across China, with respect to observational data, what people on the ground are continuously saying is working, not working. We're looking at economic activity, resilience in China, in parts of the Middle East, understanding which policies and which messages work. We're in a dynamic and complex dynamic environment in which governments and companies need to understand not only who's being tested, why, when, how, and why not, and who's obeying by quarantine orders and who's resistant to them, but also which messages work. And message testing is something that we've not only done in the public health sector, but we've also done for the State Department. We do on a continuous basis to understand the efficacy of messages in very difficult environments.
Fantastic. Okay, we'll switch to Nick. Nick, I've got some investments in some other sort of solar energy opportunities or plays. You know, the cost of energy produced by solar power has been dropping considerably over the last decade. Do you see any new advancements in solar power, and you know, are those changes, how much do those changes affect your business?
Yeah, you know, it's the curve that we've been on for a while that we're probably all familiar with, just that, you know, the cost of solar panels and everything else involved with the systems just continue to decrease. I always remember, like, the first time we bought solar panels a little over 10 years ago, the price was close to $4 per watt, and now, depending on what market we're in, it's 20 to 35 cents per watt. So it's really fallen, you know, more than 90%, so really substantially over that time frame, and that's really been additive from a number of different factors. So you know, obviously the economies of scale and greater efficiencies and things like that across the whole spectrum have helped. Looking forward, you know, I think first and foremost, that's what we have our eyes on is continuing to see the panels get cheaper, more efficient, etc. On the regulatory side, like we were the first ones to develop a community solar project in New York, and also the first ones in Maine. So community solar, you know, in a nutshell, is installing solar on a rooftop or on a ground, and selling the energy to the community, to the people that offtake that energy throughout the community. So that's something that we're quite excited about as well. But I think we're actually quite technology agnostic, and just really happy that, you know, so much investment's going into the industry. It's gotten to be so large now, and expect that to just continue to drive better economics in the industry as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, you know, a lot of the product you're likely purchasing is coming from China. I know a lot of the solar cell manufacturing is based in China. Are you seeing any issues with logistics and supply disruption for product?
Yeah, no, good question. So, you know, this industry, on the one hand, has gotten so large and diversified, but at the same time, the leading solar manufacturers, the leading inverter manufacturers, they're all Chinese companies, pretty much. You know, they'll often manufacture in other countries as well for tariff reasons. You know, we have an overseas business in the Philippines, developing building financing projects in the Philippines. And so when China first had the issue with COVID-19, we did have some slowdown. Like, it measured in the sort of 2 to 4 week time frame in terms of getting equipment out of China. And so we saw firsthand what was happening there, the slowdown and then the recovery. And then, of course, now we're all hit on this side of the ocean in terms of slowdown, in terms of economic activity here. So in terms of actually from China, it was very minimal. It was very manageable. And the bigger thing now is really grappling with, like, you know, our biggest portion of our pipeline is the Northeast US. And of course, New York, New Jersey, et cetera, are really dealing with COVID-19 quite a bit right now.
Mhm. You know, how much of your product cost is part of the overall, you know, cost of an installation? Just give me the sense of the economics based on a change in any kind of product supply cost.
Yeah, very roughly. Of course, it varies by market, but roughly speaking, I would say 50% is hard cost of the solar panels, inverters, racking, and then most of the remaining 50% is the installation subcontractors, permitting, the other type of human capital costs that go with that.
Okay, perfect. Okay, next, another sort of question geared towards each individual company. This one's for Sean. So you guys have announced several new products that you are intending to launch this year. Maybe you can describe each product and, you know, what the improvement is, and of course how the launch is going right now.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, so we've been selling our first generation technology now for about 5 years, and based on market feedback during that time, there's a certain segment of our market that needs more performance and is willing to pay more. So based on interactions with customers over the last 5 years, we've announced a higher end product that'll have a list price of $150,000, about 67-68% gross margins, and it's targeted mostly at pharmaceutical companies, and we're referring to it as our 100 megahertz product. Our current product is a 60 megahertz product, and so about double the price. And so we're really excited about that. Our R&D department in Calgary has been slowed down a little bit by the COVID crisis, but it's continuing to work, and we expect a really exciting product launch mid-year. So really happy about that.
So a little bit more on that. So if it's geared towards the pharmaceutical companies, I personally believe there's going to be a tremendous increase in spend within sort of the call it the pandemic preparedness and future drug discovery. What are there? Can you tell us a little bit more about what your product is eventually going to do, and is there any sort of connections directly to the coronavirus, strategies right now?
Yeah, so this new product in particular is going to be used initially for measuring chemical content and so on, but we're working on technologies with partners that will allow it to do things like I mentioned before, differentiate between viral and bacterial pneumonia. We also have some exciting partnerships in the diagnostic space that using human blood and urine can detect if somebody's had a concussion. So those are types of applications that we couldn't do with our current product line, but with this higher end product we will be able to do, and mostly those types of applications will be launched with partners.
Okay, perfect. No, thank you. Okay, Nick, back to you. You mentioned that you guys right now are operating in some of the hardest hits part of the U.S., the sort of the Northeast, New York, New Jersey. You have announced some projects recently in that area. Obviously, no doubt there's delays. I can imagine it's a little bit difficult to, like you said, deal with permitting and project soft costs, I guess you call it. Can you give us some color on those sort of contract wins, and maybe even some more details on the economics of a project like that?
Yeah, for sure. So, and yeah, in the short term, there's delays, but really focused on the medium and the long term here, where our backlog has been growing really significantly. And yeah, so the projects that we've announced recently, most of them are around the New York area. The most high profile one is on a kind of a corporate campus in Westchester, just north of New York City. And so for that client, We are, it's I think a 6.7 megawatt solar project. It's actually going to be ground mounted, so you can kind of think of like an office park with a lot of green field around it. And the way that we work on these is, so we'll install the solar system, and we'll actually sell energy to people throughout the community. So the corporate client that we're working with, they get paid a rent, so we rent this off of them to install the solar system. In that case, they're actually going through an expansion where they're actually bringing in an educational facility and a boarding school. And so actually the town wanted them to install solar as part of this. So we were able to help out our corporate client both with the rent and providing some help with them as they were going through the permitting and planning there. And then throughout the community, so if you live within this area, you can buy energy from the system. It's just credited to your energy bill, and you save 10%. Is how it works for them. So yeah, the corporate client benefits. They don't put any money down for us to do this for them, and then the off-takers of the energy benefit as well. So the proverbial win-win. So that one's on a corporate campus. We've also announced ones. We have a portfolio of rooftops within New York, etc. So these are warehouses and shopping malls and things like that where they have big empty rooftops.
And going forward, where do you see sort of the best new opportunities for you guys?
Yeah, so of course, like we did a lot of work in Canada in the past, and right now we've been really growing quite fast in the Northeast US, and that's our biggest area of focus right now. We see the greater New York City area market having about $1 billion opportunity, we think, over about the next decade or so. The amount of these community solar projects that have been built here so far in terms of like net present value so far are maybe in the $50 million range. So we're still very early in the game. We're one of the most active and most experienced developers here. So we're excited about that. And expanding from just New York City into more so in New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, etc. I think we'll see some wins a little bit outside of our traditional states there. But then also we happen to be at the right place at the right time in Maine. So might not be the first state you'd think of for solar, but it's a market that hasn't had a solar market yet, even though electricity prices are high. There's a bit of a past political pushback that led to that, but it's really opened up more recently. And so just based on the better economics of solar and the electricity prices there, we're having a lot of success. So we've announced a couple of deals there, but our pipeline actually in Maine is something we're really excited about. So stay tuned for more there. And then I'd be remiss not to touch on the Philippines. So a bit of a quirky place for us to be, maybe. The same person who actually started up our New England business out of Maine, he had started up our Philippines business now, I guess, about 4.5 years ago, and then he moved back and helped us expand up here. But yeah, Philippines going great. No incentives whatsoever. Regulations aren't supportive; they're just light. You have a great team over there, and yeah, so we're excited about the business we have growing there too, and maybe that becomes a model for us to expand into future markets down the road. But we think we can be profitable, cash flow positive, recurring revenue just based on these markets we're in. So that's the focus first and foremost.
I'd be a little remiss not to ask you the addressable market. I mean, you can put as big a number as you want on it. It's just a function of whatever resources you guys can have to go and tackle it. Am I correct?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think it's kind of silly numbers, right? So you kind of smile when you say them, but then realize you got to really focus on where you are. Our company is a little over 10 years old now, and in the first, especially half of the company's history, I think we tried to be all things to everybody, and we've really honed things in recently to the markets that we know. And I think that's about the last 4 years now. We've known what markets we're good at. We've brought the platform together like we've talked about, and really want to make sure we do well there. But I think we also have a better understanding now of how we expand this model successfully. We have a very good sense of what the platform is, and so it's really a matter of identifying good sustainable markets. Pick another state I haven't mentioned yet. When the economics in that market are good for us, to have the right person to lead that, start out right from the beginning and developing those projects, and then building up the pipeline and then the asset base there for us to succeed with.
Great, thanks. Okay, Neil. Here's a little interesting question. So, you've grown your business quite nicely over the last few years. You're now profitable. How do you balance the need for providing data sort of for the good of humanity versus the drive for profit in times like this crisis?
Paul, thank you. So the Larry Fink question, I guess, or the social good question. Vital. Look, the purpose of a business is to maximize a profit, right? At the same time, with a view to advancing the needs of your core stakeholders, which is your community, your people, right? At the same time, we were born in a data for good environment, and there is unquestionably, and we are doing it, situations where our data for the public good are demonstrably helpful in understanding economic resilience, in understanding whether or not people are afraid of return to work, not afraid of return to work, measuring the gig economy and how they're differentially being affected. And we're providing that, and it's being used right now. At the same time, what we've also learned is that it would be irresponsible for us to release too much data right now without it being sort of sufficiently curated and understood. And we're seeing that right now around the world. There are all sorts of amazing initiatives where data are being produced, and yet that's actually causing more anxiety, more fear, because people are not digesting it properly. So we need to appropriately price in the amount of time it takes for us and our partners, whether they're academics or whether they're our partners in the private sector, to actually interpret the data, digest it, curate it, and disseminate it. So it's a long way of basically saying, hey, we've got to balance. We're focused like a laser on profit, but this is one of those beautiful moments in history where we can do it right? We can drive a profit, but at the same time, work for the public good simultaneously.
And Neil, I don't think I've asked you this, but what do you see as your addressable market size? Like how big could your business be?
So, it's funny. I don't like baseball. I guess in quarantine mode, I'm starting to use, but I use sports analogies all the time, right? So I feel we're in maybe the first inning of a 9-inning game. Okay. So if you think about that in terms of size, ambition, where we want to go, if you think of the 9th inning as maybe being Amazon. So that's where we want to head. And we've announced publicly that, 2024, we want to look toward $30 million US in revenue in 2024. And that's the milestone we want to reach. And then in order to get there, we need to drive on a recurring revenue on a continual basis. Addressable market specifically, traditional research, $75 billion in the traditional research, and just, the US alone, and bread and butter research. But this is the data ecosystem in terms of the demands is greenfield, to borrow a well-worn phrase. It's growing dynamically, and a huge amount of information that was historically collected in person is just not amenable to in-person data collection. And clients, whether in the public sector, the security sector in particular, are really hungry for scientifically reliable data in all information environments that can be collected through digital means.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, back to Nick. Now, UGE has gone through a significant restructuring over the last year or so. You've also announced a significant amount of new business. Can you tell us what happened and sort of what you've done to reposition yourselves, and then give me a sense, or give the audience a sense, of what your backlog looks like now in terms of actual numbers?
Yeah, for sure. So as I mentioned earlier, like the 3 areas of our business are developing the projects, building the projects, and financing and maintaining the projects over time. We were traditionally a developer. We were traditionally originating the projects ourselves. We didn't have the experience and the expertise of the engineering and building of the project. So in 2016, we went out and we acquired what was the #1 commercial scale EPC in this business in Ontario. And from an experience and expertise perspective, it fits very well into where we are today, and we're very happy with how that fits. But it also brought with it a fairly significant revenue base. And so our plan at the beginning was to make that a line of business and continue to grow that area of the business, even though it was lower margin and a bit more tricky business to run. What really kind of changed things for us is the election in Ontario in 2018. On the first day in office, Doug Ford ended all the renewable energy programs in Ontario. And so, almost overnight, the business there went from, generating good revenues year over year, even though those margins were a bit lower, to projects being canceled and just not seeing a future there. So, that was tough on the business, but it allowed us to focus on like what we really want to be and what we really want to do, and that's developing the projects for our own book. And using that skill set of ours to build them and get them to the finish line and so on. So it took just the nature of these projects from the time that we decided to scale down that Canadian business. It took about a year to finish off all those projects and then start winding the rest of that down. And we filed we kind of officially wound it down starting end of December and into this year. So when that's all wrapped up. It would have been wrapped up already, but except for COVID-19, the actual court approval for winding down that business hasn't gone through yet. But it'll be a big improvement to our balance sheet. So we're glad that's all been put behind us. I think really for about the last 9 months, though, we've just been focused on the future in terms of our U.S. development business, our Philippines development business, and really building the backlog quite a bit. So over that time frame, our backlog's about doubled. Right now, we just announced recently it's between 45 and 50 million USD. Our revenue last year, our numbers are actually coming out after this panel, but our revenues last year were down from the year before. Call it in the range of 5 million USD. So our backlog somewhere in the range of 10 times what we did in revenue for 2019. So very excited about putting that backlog on roofs and in the ground and seeing our revenues grow quite a bit in the process.
Oh, fantastic. Congratulations on the turnaround. Okay, Sean, you mentioned Nanalysis went public last year. You've had a new infusion of capital. Perhaps you can tell the audience what it's, what being a public company has done to impact the business and where you're using that new capital apart from the M&A that you mentioned earlier.
Growing our sales organization. So right now we sell direct in the United States and Canada. We do an excellent job of providing not only sales, but support in those markets. And my vision is to have a significant physical presence in every major market in the world. So, 2 in Asia, Middle East, Latin America, to provide not only direct sales, but also channel management for the dealers that are in those areas, technical support in the right time zone, and in the right languages. So that would be the major use of that, of those monies, other than the M&A that you mentioned.
Great, thanks. Okay, so Neil, your business supplies data products for a lot of different industries. Where do you see the best growth opportunities, and what do you need, if anything, to address these markets properly?
So salespeople, to answer the second one, and that's what we're doing, right? So, and we've announced that publicly and really driving on that. And if anything, the one thing I'm most proud of in this business is having turned it around from a think tank into a full-on sales DNA type organization. In terms of the most lucrative opportunities, our humanitarian aid work is going to grow. It's going to grow organically. That's a nice business, and it's moving along. Our private sector work is really important. So we do work, obviously, for amazing clients like BofA Securities all around the world. We want to grow that type of business, in particular with any US-based entity that cares about China in particular, India in particular, consumer-facing entities, understanding rapid reaction change. And then the third area, which is security, which is national security for G7 organizations, both on the classified and unclassified side. And this is really about understanding fragile environments, extremism, and abrupt change, and how people react to change. And I think in this period of instability in the world, there is a deep interest in data that can deliver insights on those issues.
Fantastic. Okay, I'll stick with you, Neil. We're just going to have two more questions here, but I always sort of allow CEOs to sort of open-ended answer this question, but what do you guys do best, better than any of your competitors? What do you do best in that industry that you operate in?
What we do best is we hear from quiet voices, right? So we identify and anticipate those thunderclaps. So whether that thunderclap is the election of President Trump, which was a relatively easy signal for us to predict, having gathered information that just wasn't appearing in traditional pollster data from those 18 to 34-year-old alienated sort of young men in the Rust Belt, or whether those thunderclaps are in sort of gig economy workers, wherever they may be throughout the world, or whether it's in pockets of the Philippines or areas of Asia that are otherwise untapped. And I just think zeroing in on that last bit, China, right? So we either pay attention to China or we ignore China at our peril. And we need to understand the Chinese consumer. We need to understand the Chinese investor. And this is where RIWI, which stands for Real-Time Interactive Worldwide Intelligence, comes in. Whether you're a China long-short hedge fund, or whether you're just a coffee company that wants to understand that Luckin doesn't have the market share that it proclaims to have, and you then want that insight or that information edge before someone else, you come to us.
Fantastic. Nick, your turn. What do you guys do better than anybody else that you compete with?
Yeah, I think it's really this aspect of being the turnkey developer. If you look in the public markets, there's no other company like us being a turnkey commercial solar developer. But even in the private market, it's fairly rare. And if you think about, like it's about 15 years now since the clean tech bubble started, and it's almost too bad that more clean tech companies didn't make people money. A lot of the money was made on the one side by the early stage development of good projects, but that was often done by pretty small companies who were, or not even companies, who are going out there and finding good sites. They make a bit of money doing that, but then they'll sell it up the chain. And so the other people that have made a lot of money are the Brookfield Renewables and so on of the world that have made a lot of money owning projects and generating really good returns over a long period of time. What we really think is like we can earn the returns across that platform right there, but also have a lot more efficiency in doing it by building them and bringing the origination all the way through to the operation and maintenance of these projects. And that's what we're doing on a number of projects now, and we'll be doing across this backlog of ours. So yeah, and I think that especially within the commercial space, that's going to be important because every single one of our clients that I can think of has multiple buildings, right? So whether it's a REIT or some other sort of real estate ownership group. And so with that in mind, it's really important to have that ongoing relationship and be the trusted advisor to them to develop across their entire portfolio, which is something you don't see when you're developing, say, a single utility scale solar farm. So yeah, excited for having brought this platform together and where we go from here.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, you, Sean, what does your business do better than anybody else?
Yeah, from a technology platform perspective, we miniaturize magnet systems from something that's very, very large, superconducting magnets, down to something that's very small and very high quality. It's a very difficult thing to do. Several large companies have tried to miniaturize that technology and failed in the past. And then from a market pull perspective, we help customers and partners understand how that miniaturized technology can serve their missions. And maybe the best example of that is a large German company called Robert Bosch. that came to us and said that they have shipping companies that want to analyze bunker fuel on cargo ships. And so we've helped them understand exactly how they can do that before these bunker fuels go in these large engines via the Bosch fuel injection system and damage these engines. And some of these engines are like $50 million Rolls-Royce engines or $50 million Cummins engines. And so when bad bunker fuel gets into those engines, it causes a lot of problems. Bosch understand how our miniaturized magnet technology can analyze bunker fuel in conjunction with their fuel injection systems to help their customers.
Okay, I see that we're getting closer to our end of time here. I'm going to give you guys each sort of 60 seconds. If there's something I haven't asked, but you think is a message that you want to make sure that our audience gets, one last piece of information to our audience. What's the key message you want them to walk away with? I'll give you 60 seconds each, and I'll start with Neil.
We are all entrepreneurs, everyone on this call, everyone on this panel. We drive prosperity and resilience, and we will rebound from this challenge. Thank you, guys.
That's awesome. Nick, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, guys. No, I think you did a great job in terms of getting the stories out. So I think you pretty much covered it, but happy to be here, and hope everyone's safe and healthy through this crazy time. UGI.com for more information on the company, and yeah, thanks so much.
And Sean, 60 seconds. What do you want to tell the audience?
I founded the company 11 years ago. We started off as purely an R&D initiative. It took us 5 years to get a product to market. But since then, we've built a real operational company that sells all over the world. We do everything ourselves. We manufacture ourselves, which protects the IP from products being reversed engineers in markets like China and India. And we're going to continue to grow a fully vertically instrumentation company for global sales into the test and measurement space.
Fantastic. Your website?
Nanalysis.com. So Nanalysis is like the word analysis, but with an N in front.
And Neil, we didn't get your website.
Thank you. That's RIWI.com. Thanks, Paul.
All right, and we got Nick. So great. Okay.
So Paul, one audience question for you that I have is, as an investor in small, micro, nano caps, I mean, what are some of the things that you're looking for from companies, whether they're coming up with solutions or to actually tackle the COVID situation from any industry, to some businesses like some of the companies that we see here that aren't directly involved in providing COVID solutions as of yet?
So I think all three of these individuals that we have here in front of us are what we call intelligent fanatics. These are three individuals that, they live and breathe their business. If you want to be positioned with CEOs like this, because they're going to find a way of steering their business out of the sort of the issue we're in, and they're best positioned to find opportunities within sort of the crisis we're dealing with. I think we've got three great Canadian success stories here. I've seen these guys operate for the last several years. I'm a big fan of all three of them, and I think you're going to see, once things settle down, you're going to see either continued growth from these businesses, or quite frankly, some of these I think are going to be able to take advantage of some of the opportunities that present themselves. So, key thing I'm looking at here are three real fanatical owner operators of these businesses.
That's great. And I wanted to also remind the audience that all three companies that you're hearing today on the panel are going to be presenting on Wednesday, April 22nd, RIWI at 9:40 a.m. Eastern, UGE at 11:20 a.m. Eastern, and Nanalysis at 5 p.m. Eastern. So be sure to go on to planetmicrocapshowcase.com to listen to those presentations. With that, Paul, Neil, Nick, Sean, thank you guys so much for joining us and participating on this panel. And Paul, for moderating a great job.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks for
Thank
certainly
you,
having us.
gentlemen.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.